thousands of years, we have been shaping the landscapes and nature of our country. Once the basin of the River Thames was a wild marshland. Today, London is one of the largest cities in the world. In this crowded island, it might seem that there is little room for wildlife. But even here in the heart of our modern world, plants and animals still have a place. On the eve of a new century and a new millennium, we have much to celebrate about the country in which we live. The golden eagle symbolizes wilderness. This impressive bird of prey needs space and seclusion, rare qualities in a land of 60 million people. But here in Scotland, golden eagles have doubled their numbers in the last 50 years. From the cities of the south to the mountains of the north, this series is a portrait of our diverse land today. It is also the start of a journey through an entire year in living Britain. Nothing is more British than our weather and our seasons. Each month has its own appeal, colour and sound, atmosphere and rhythm. Britain's rich mosaic of landscapes changes with the seasons, as winter turns to spring and then to summer. A constant cycle of renewal. The passage of the seasons also influences the lives of people, especially those who work the land. Even in our towns and cities, there is a seasonal rhythm of colour and sound. The natural history of Britain has also been shaped by its long human history. Almost 5,000 winters have come and gone since the founding of Stonehenge. It reminds us that many generations have made this land what it is today. "700 miles to the north, in Shetland, wilderness comes face to face with the 21st century. It is here that our winter story begins. At this outpost of the British Isles, the longest nights span 20 hours, and the northern lights illuminate the sky. waters around the Sullom Voe oil terminal are home to a thriving otter population. In a lifetime, most of us will never see an otter. But here in Shetland, family groups of mothers with their growing cubs can be watched playing and fishing against the backdrop of the largest oil terminal in Europe. Otters dive for marine fish and crustaceans. They hunt day and night in these clean, rich waters. Butterfish and eel pout are favourites, and the family hunts as a group through the kelp that fringes the loch. The otters feed voraciously whenever sea conditions are calm enough. The family group will stay together all winter, learning the skills necessary for survival and independence. In Shetland, there is an otter for every mile of coastline, some 800 in all, making this the densest otter population in Europe. Shetland's fishing industry continues year-round. For generations it was the livelihood of many families, until the oil brought new wealth. The principal fishing harbour and main town of Shetland is Lerwick. 60,000 tons of fish are landed here annually, a measure of the richness of these cold northern seas. It is also the reason why so many grey seals live in these waters, competing with the fishermen who once hunted them for their skins and blubber. The winter catch is mainly mackerel, 15,000 tons between September and March. It provides a bonus for the seals, now protected by law, and even aided by free handouts. In winter, winds from the northwest bring Atlantic storms. Fishermen batten down their hatches and head back to harbour. Bad weather can put even the otters at risk. Sudden storms may separate a cub from its mother, but most will survive the worst that winter hurls at these low, windswept islands. Shetland has rain for 250 days of the year. In winter, the combination of wind, wet and cold is demanding. Eider ducks, protected by their thick down and waterproof feathers, ride out the storm. Shetland pony, domesticated more than 2,000 years ago, is Britain's smallest breed. They are well adapted to withstand the long erratic winter. As the storm subsides, Shetland's winter beauty is revealed. Since the 1970s, the offshore oil boom has brought great changes to Shetland, increasing employment but potentially putting pressure on wildlife. Otters, however, are doing well. Elsewhere in Britain they have disappeared from rivers and coastline, victims of habitat change and human disturbance. There is now a commitment up and down the country to bring them back. And Shetland has shown that otters can have a secure place in our new industrial age. There are no golden eagles in Shetland. Their natural home is the mountainous terrain of Scotland's Western Isles and the majestic Highlands. Perhaps it's a surprise that any small birds should spend winter on these mountains, but flocks of snow buntings arrive from Iceland to scavenge for seeds and insects, and scraps left by skiers. More snow falls in the Cairngorms than any other mountain range in Britain. This high plateau of rounded peaks is ideal ski country. It is also the largest nature reserve in Britain. Ptarmigan remain here year-round. Their thick plumage turns white in winter, ideal camouflage against the eagle-eyed. So does the fur of the mountain hare. Smaller ears and extra layers of fur and fat make it better insulated than its lowland cousin, the brown hare. Roads and ski lifts now penetrate this wilderness, giving us year-round access. And in all but the worst weather conditions, visitors share these slopes with the resident wildlife. Red grouse do not turn white in winter, so they keep to the lower slopes, where the snow doesn't lie so long. Their red combs and distinctive calls are conspicuous on the snowfields. The ptarmigan and mountain hare will keep their white coats until they molt at the end of winter, their breeding time. The red grouse have already started their courtship. The males display, showing off their red combs. This extravagant behavior helps ward off competitors and attracts the hens. A receptive female will allow the male grouse to catch her. The pair will stay together until the chicks are safely fledged. For skiers, retreat from the mountains is an easy option. Wildlife must take whatever cover can be found. For red deer, winter is the season of greatest hardship. It is the young calves and older stags that are the most likely to die. The golden eagle usually hunts down its prey, but in winter it will also scavenge to survive. Each bird needs a home range of at least 15 square miles to provide enough food, and in winter, snow and ice can disguise or deplete the supply, putting even this skillful predator at risk. Scotland is home to some 900 adult golden eagles, almost twice the number of half a century ago. Their population density is now one of the highest in the world. Their success is due in part to the unnaturally high stocks of red deer and sheep in these glens, and to the inevitable casualties of winter. Scotland is also the stronghold of the red squirrel. But this wasn't always the case. As the ancient Caledonian forest was felled in the 15th century, their numbers were decimated, and by the 1800s they were virtually extinct in Scotland. Reintroduced from England, they have re-established themselves in these northern woodlands. Like their grey cousins who now dominate the south of Britain, red squirrels are one of the earliest mammals to breed. The crested tit is one of the first birds to rear young up here, but it will be April before it nests, when winter releases its icy grip. highest mountains in England are in the Lake District. Carved by the great glaciers of the most recent ice age, their peaks and ridges still have a young, unweathered character. In deepest winter, when red tarn freezes and the shattered glacial ridge of Striding Edge is covered by snow, that long winter of the Ice Age seems like yesterday. Rivers flowing westwards from the Lake District meet the Irish Sea at Britain's largest area of intertidal mud and sand flats, Morecambe Bay. Twice each day, 120 square miles are exposed by the receding tide. All this glorious mud is the powerhouse for the entire natural economy of the bay. And surprisingly, traditional cocklers can still dig a living from it. Tidal mudflats produce more protein than even cornfields or pastures full of cattle. In many ways, this is some of the most fertile land in the country. Reaping this natural harvest, wading birds work the tide line, constantly moving ahead of its progress. The advancing water pushes the oyster catchers and other waders towards the land, where they'll roost until the tide turns. In winter, Morecambe Bay supports 225,000 of these birds, some of the largest flocks in Europe. These huge congregations of knot spent summer breeding in the high Arctic. Now they join many other species of waders that have come to overwinter on our ice-free estuaries and tidal mudflats. In all, 1.5 million waders spend winter on British mud, almost half the entire population of Europe's wading birds. Far away from the warming influence of the Atlantic Ocean, the flatlands of East Anglia can be bleak in winter. But compared with the Arctic lands they have left behind, these hooper swans, migrants from Iceland, find little hardship in our weather. Thousands of wild swans come to graze on this flooded pasture land in Cambridgeshire, known as the Ouse Washes. During the winter months they feed and pair up in preparation for the flight back north to their breeding grounds. Winter is also the time for cutting Norfolk reed. It provides a valuable harvest for thatch and is vital for maintaining the local nature reserves. This is the quiet time for birds and other wetland wildlife, and taking the dead reeds now causes least disturbance. These reed beds have also been adopted by newcomers from the Orient. In its homeland, the Chinese water deer is hunted for its meat and skin. But here in Britain, where it escaped from zoos and parks in the 1940s, it has found a secure new home. It's thought that as many as 600 of these stocky deer live wild in East Anglia, where they have reed beds and alder scrub for cover, and lush grass for grazing. Winter is their rutting season. Each male sets up a territory in which he will guard his mate. They have no antlers, but their large canines act as tusks. The Chinese water deer joins 3 other species of introduced deer, sika, muntjac and fallow, all living wild in Britain. Only the red and roe deer are truly native. Further south, there are early signs of spring. Once known as snow piercers, the flowers of snowdrops, protected by their green leaf-like sheaths, penetrate through frozen ground to carpet the woodland. Long before this great beech tree comes into leaf, loyal residents congregate in its branches. All over Britain, rooks are assembling to pair up and mate. Like all the crow family, rooks nest early. Throughout January and February, the reunited pairs add twigs to last year's nests, or build new ones if winter storms destroyed them. Rookeries and country churches seem to go together. By the time these rooks have chicks, it will be nearly Easter, and by May Day, most will have flown the nest. The female does most of the building, weaving a bulky nest from twigs brought by her industrious mate. As well as bringing nest material, the males will pass food to their mates, reinforcing their partnership. Preening each other strengthens the bond between them. Rooks can stay loyal to each other for many seasons, often for life. They jointly defend the nest against twig-pilfering neighbors. Once the nest is ready, and comfortably lined to the female's satisfaction, the pair mate. There will be several matings before the full clutch is complete, and she can start incubating the eggs. In a month's time, the colony will be full of clamoring chicks. A landfill site near London is home to a community of foxes. Like the rooks, they begin breeding early in the year. Red foxes have lived in these islands since the last ice age. Although their habitat has changed, their adaptable character has helped them survive. With the huge increase of household waste in the 20th century, such places have become a permanent feature of our landscape. Wildlife takes advantage of the security of this no-man's land and its rich pickings. January and February are peak courtship times for foxes. As the vixen comes into heat, the dog fox guards her to prevent her mating with any other male. He grooms his partner as a prelude to their mating. The vixen is equally possessive, seeing off any other female who intrudes on their courtship. When the female is on heat, the dog fox will follow her like a shadow, often for days, until she is ready for him. When they eventually mate, the union can last for more than an hour. This prolonged process helps ensure that the dog fox is the only father of the litter that will be born here in spring. On damp, mild nights in February, toads, just awakened from hibernation, set off for their breeding grounds. The hazardous journey can cover 2 or 3 miles. Some males ambush the larger females and hitch a ride, repelling boarders in their determination to fertilize the eggs. The reproductive drive of these amorous amphibians is remarkable. Despite the provision of toad tunnels and toad patrols, there are many casualties. But through sheer numbers, the hordes win through. Contrary to popular belief, badgers do not hibernate. Although in winter their appearances above ground may be sporadic, the set is never quiet for long. On warmer nights, dry vegetation is collected to line the bedding chambers and to prepare for the birth of cubs. At the entrance to the set, adults and last year's cubs help rid each other of the irritating ticks and bugs picked up underground. These are highly social animals, and mutual grooming and scent marking bonds the family together. Underground in the breeding chamber, this year's cubs may already have been born. But it will be April or even May before the sow will allow them to explore the woodland. By February, the woodlands of the south begin to have the feel of spring. The first amphibians to claim the forest ponds are frogs. Their glutinous spawn clings to the reeds in clumps, providing a challenging obstacle for the new arrivals. By dawn, the streetwise toads have almost completed their marathon trek. Female toads release their eggs in a double string. Like frogs, the males hang on by their thumbs, which have specially developed nuptial pads. As the toads move through the vegetation, the ribbons of spawn are wrapped around stems. This toady scrum sometimes continues for days. In the heart of London, life is warming up. Like us, many animals have moved from the countryside into town, Rock doves were once a bird of wild cliff-top ledges. Their descendants include the famous London pigeon. The bowing display of the male pigeon is a sign that spring has reached the city. The grey squirrel, first introduced from North America in 1876, is intelligent and resourceful, and has also made a success of urban living. Like their native red cousins, grey squirrels have a winter mating season. In early February, females start collecting dry leaves and bark to line the dray where they will soon give birth. Built high in a tree, it will provide seclusion for the nursing mother. The nursery dray can be the size of a football. Strong strips of bark help bind it together. Gathering sufficient material calls for agility and persistence, and DIY home building is not always an easy job. Female squirrels come into heat for only one day in each estrus cycle, and for the neighbouring males, it is an opportunity not to be missed. The scent of a female in season attracts a potential mate. The male responds by flicking his tail and chattering loudly. This commotion attracts other males. Only then does the female set off through the trees to lead her suitors on a merry dance. In the confusion, some males bark up the wrong tree and end up chasing the tails of other males. Finally, however, the female is outrun and is mated by the leading male, probably the healthiest individual, to father her offspring. The male takes no further part in rearing the young, which will be born in early spring. Female squirrels, both grey and red, make very diligent single parents. London, like all British cities, still has its share of green places. Cemeteries, parks, gardens, and even landfill sites. All are valuable oases for wildlife. There may no longer be wolves or bears down there, but the prehistoric marshland that became London still supports a surprising variety of wild animals and plants, as well as 7 million people. Throughout February, the herons in Regent's Park have been building their nests. The same sites are used year after year by loyal pairs of herons. The male defends his territory and his mate by stretching his long neck and pointing his bill skywards. This puts off rival males and also prompts the grooming of their elaborate plumage. This nesting ritual has probably remained unchanged since the first herons settled the primeval basin of the River Thames. What has changed is the backdrop. This heron chick is the first of spring. If it survives to adulthood, it's likely to rear its own young in these same trees. Another generation faces the challenges of life. In many ways, we have become distanced from nature and from the rhythm of the year. But even in the warmth and shelter of the city, there is an air of expectancy as the new season approaches. Even in the wilderness of the far north, there is the certainty that winter will finally give way to spring.